Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I'm Sid Partu. Joining me today is Steve Baxi and Rasco. Rasco's Modern Life. And that was a buzzer for my dryer.
That was the buzzer to say the show has started. It's great.
Yes it is.
Perfectly timed.
That's what that was.
We planned this shit, people.
Yeah, painstaking. Months of practicing and working on that.
You don't know this, but all of our shows are scripted.
Yeah, 100%, which makes all the really funny moments much more impressive.
Right?
Yeah. Anyway, joining me today is Steve Baxi and Rasco. Say hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
Hi.
Rasco's always uncharacteristically quiet during, recording. Rasco gets totally, deer in the headlights stage fright sometimes. It's kind of adorable.
I kind of feel like he's smarter than everyone, so, he just sits there silently mocking us with his brain.
Yeah, probably.
This is true.
It's the bandana. It hides the size of his brain.
Yeah, but that's okay because it's Rasco's topic tonight, so he's going to have the most to say out of everyone and is totally going to lead the conversation tonight. That's what's going to happen. Rasco, what are we talking about tonight?
Well, the thing is, I kind of forgot, but I remember that it had something to do with filming multiple movies at the same time.
That's exactly what we're talking about.
Okay. So I didn't
mentioned Avatar by name last time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we don't want to just talk about Avatar.
No, I'm just
right?
trying to refresh him.
Yeah. Before we get into all that, though, I want you, the listener, to know you can download episodes of Geeky Gentlemen. Steve, where can they find the link to download the episode?
They can find it in the description.
Okay, Rasco, say someone wants to download an older episode of Geeky Gentlemen. What would they have to do?
They can, leave a comment, and it will be uploaded to some place where they can acquire this.
Actually, yes. That is exactly what they can do. They can leave a comment on the episode, and it'll be uploaded for them. There we go. We're slowly getting them there. Yeah. This would be so much better if I had my crop right next to Rasco and could just, whip him in the back of the head, or maybe the anal region.
Oh.
Yeah. Everyone calm your boners, stop writing your slash fiction. This is an episode right now. Okay.
Damn it!
Yeah, I know. Dude, that was one of the funniest things ever in one of the Geek Evolution live shows. Eric's sitting there talking about having a dream about Cap, and I leave in the comments, oh, this will be great for my Geek Evolution slash fiction, not expecting Cap to read it, and then he read it on the show.
Oh, that's awesome.
The greatest thing ever.
Those two are totally married.
Yeah, totally. They live together. Come on, that's pretty good fuel for the slash fiction, all right. I'll film multiple Geekvolution slash fiction films in Cap's house.
Boy.
Yeah, at the same time. Anyway, Rasco, so what made you want to talk about this?
When it comes to movies, they are the actual process of creating a film is radically different from a lot of other forms of art because it's far less controllable. It's like a scientific experiment where you have controlled factors. And with film, I think it's an example of where you have the least amount of control over certain factors when you're making a film. I don't think it's actually at the pinnacle of the least amount of control. I think live performance art probably takes the cake because literally anything could happen during any performance that could fuck it up or change the way of which it's performed. But when we're talking about movies, it's definitely different than, for example, recording a song or doing a painting, because those rely on like very few people, like few factors that can go wrong. Like if it's a painting, it's you and the canvas and your paint, and that's it, right? And as long as you don't die, it's going to get finished. And as long as something crazy doesn't happen to fuck up the painting, you're good. Well, with film, and we recently had a good example of this with Carrie Fisher passing away. It's really interesting because, I mean, nobody wrote, or no one was plotting out the new trilogy of Star Wars films with the idea that, oh, Carrie Fisher is going to pass away. No one was thinking that, right? So it's part of the risk of filmmaking, where anything could go wrong, because a film isn't made in a day. It's not made in a week. It's made over multiple weeks, oftentimes more than 50 days, sometimes 100, sometimes 150 days. And I think that doing kind of like what we've had with like Lord of the Rings and what's going to happen with James Cameron's Avatar, I wonder how much of that is purely just like budgetary, like we're just going to like ramp up and start production and finish. And I also wonder if it ever crosses their mind when they go with that strategy of like, is it because they're worried about certain things happening in the time between movies being made? And I don't know, it's just kind of interesting.
I think it's one of those things where it's not so much a worry about people dying, because so few studios ever take that into consideration.
Yeah, no. I'm not that in particular. That was.
I think it's more of just like a budgetary thing of, let's just try to get as much, and not like from the studio perspective. I think it's a budgetary thing from the filmmaker perspective, where they're like, especially with something like Lord of the Rings, right? That was considered the unfilmable story for a very long time, and in some cases still is. That was a jab at Lord of the Rings. That was considered the unfilmable story, so getting the approval to make it, I think it was maybe a little bit Peter Jackson's decision to try to make all of them at once, so that way if the first one bombed, the studio couldn't stop it. It would, like, they'd be committed to it because they've already filmed, like, 90% of the second movie and 40% of the third. So, like, I think it'd be, kind of a production, a director thing to fool the studio into having to finish it. But that can also be disastrous, like we saw with Superman 1 and 2, where Donner wanted to film them both at the same time and was actively doing that, and then the first one dropped as he was still filming the second, and the studio didn't like dealing with some of the stuff, so they cut him out and cut out Marlon Brando and all this other stuff, and then Lester put together not a bad movie, but, you know, not a great one either. Floating that out there.
Yeah, I don't hate Superman 2, but the Donner cut is superior.
Yeah, I mean, like, what's good about the theatrical cut of Superman 2 is the Donner stuff, right?
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things. It's like, it's maybe a more complete movie with a more satisfying ending in trilogy, or in sequence, but I think the Donner cut's just a better film.
Yeah.
And, yeah. I don't know. Just throwing that idea out there, because it can go one of both ways. Because, like, imagine that the first Lord of the Rings movie sucked, was the popular consensus, and not just us Star Wars fans. And then, like, extrapolate. Well, they were already filming the second. They already had all this shit done.
Yeah.
Or in the process of getting done. Could they really have stopped the wheels at that point? I don't know.
I don't know how much that's the primary reason, but it's certainly taken into effect. I feel like, though, if a studio is going to okay back-to-back filming, they are not likely to hamper the production of a sequel, because they know the movie is going to be hit. Like, this is the mentality with the Matrix sequels, where, like, The Matrix was, like, the biggest movie of the decade, as much as I hate it. And so they filmed the sequels back to back and released them like within 6 months of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And despite those not doing very well, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I oftentimes think it is like a studio. I also think it has to do with like locations.
Yeah.
Because I imagine Pirates of the Caribbean, it's probably so the second and third movie were filmed together. So obviously that's probably partially Pirates of the Caribbean was a big hit, and it was just like a kind of like a culturally important film. Just not necessarily saying it's good or that it's bad, just that like people know Johnny Depp, Jack Sparrow, like they know these things, right? Like it's kind of like ingrained into the people's minds at that point. And so they're like, okay, well, I think that they kind of saw that maybe as like a kind of like a Transformers thing where it didn't matter if Transformers 2 sucked, which it did, because the third movie would still make money because nobody's going to see a bad sequel to a movie that they like, even if I don't think the first Transformers movie is good either, but no one's going to see one bad sequel and immediately think that a franchise is going down the drain. So, like, you can be okay with filming a second and a third together, having one of them be bad, because that's not a trend of badness, where, like, we've seen that with, like, the DC film universe. Like, we've seen a trend of badness, right? I think there could be arguments that could have been made that, like, after BVS, we knew all of the systemic problems with the franchise, and we kind of could predict that trend of badness. But it wasn't until Suicide Squad where it was like, okay, something's fundamentally wrong here. And I think that, like, studios oftentimes, it's kind of a mix between, like, confidence, but also locations that are, like, that are either hard to get the rights to film at, because I know that with Episode 8, like, they filmed the scenes with Luke and Rey on that island at the end of Force Awakens. Like, they had to film those scenes, like, while filming Force Awakens, because they could only get the rights to shoot on that island for a certain amount of time, and they couldn't, like, say, okay, we want to shoot here, and then we're going to shoot here again when we do Episode 8.
Yeah, it's one of those things, like, I wonder how much of it is studio calculation, right? Of how long or how much can we guarantee that people are going to want to see it? Like, how bad does one of the movies in the franchise have to be in order to just completely turn people away from it? Like you mentioned Pirates, right? I didn't know that the second and third Pirates film were shot at the same time. Why is the third one so dissatisfying then? Because you'd think shooting them at the same time, doing that trilogy thing where the first movie kind of stands on its own, then the second and third movie tell one story, which is like kind of the unplanned trilogy, as I like to think of it.
Yeah.
You'd think that when you write two movies as one story like that, then the third movie would be ultimately more satisfying, but that so rarely happens, to the point where we have a joke in X-Men Apocalypse about it.
Yeah.
Third movie in a franchise that is the most disappointing of that new franchise.
Yeah, it's very strange. Especially in the case of Pirates. Like, there are a lot of things in that movie. It's also weird because that movie feels like a movie that's made, like, 3 to 5 years after the second movie. Like, even with just, like, where it picks up with the characters. It feels like that part, but it almost kind of feels like Return of the Jedi. Like, it feels like it was made a little bit farther away from Empire. It feels like the third movie was made years after the second movie. It doesn't feel like the movie you would have made if you had filmed them together.
Okay.
Strange, but you're right about that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those things. Like, it's a bit of a head scratcher. And I don't know. You'd think that if you were going to go through with having two movies filmed at the same time, or three movies even filmed at the same time, that you'd have a more solid plan of what you're going to work with, because you're committed at that point. You know you won't have time to adjust going into it. And maybe that's just the problem, is filming these all at once, Because I'm really scratching my head for a franchise with multiple movies filmed at the same time that just objectively works. Anyone?
MCU?
Yeah, I'll give it to you, but at the same time,
I mean, not
that's
all of those
kinda
movies are
cheap,
good,
right?
but, like, as a machine, it hasn't failed.
Yeah, but that almost feels like such a separate thing.
Does it, though? Is it? The
Okay,
way
when
they
I
make
say-
those movies, I don't know.
When I say movies filmed at the same time, it's like Iron Man 3 and Thor 2 were being filmed at the same time, but they're not in the same singular franchise. I'm talking about, like, if we filmed Iron Man 2 and Iron Man 3 at the same time.
Right.
Those are so separate things. They have different teams working on them with very small details sharing between each team.
Right.
That's not exactly what I mean.
Well, like, Back to the Future 2 and 3. Like, 2's
And
not
yet,
as
Back
loved.
to the Future is Back to Future 3 is a really disappointing ending, though, right?
Is it?
A lot of
I
people
feel like everyone I've talked to, Back to the Future 3 is, like, the second favorite.
No, I've always heard it go in order 1, 2, 3. From
Weird.
best.
Everyone I know that likes Back to the Future will always admit the second movie is the worst.
Oh, I completely disagree.
I mean,
So-
I don't think it's the worst, but, like, I don't know. I think on many levels, 3 is probably the best because it's got the most coherent character arc. I mean, I think 1 is the best cultural movie, but, like, 3 is written like a real film.
Fair enough. I don't know. I've heard debates about that one. I've heard people say it's not as good as the others. I think it's just people don't like the whole Old West thing.
Maybe.
I don't know. It's just but it's weird that we have to scratch to think of those examples.
Yeah.
So,
Like MCU, yeah, but not really.
well, I was
Well,
gonna say,
now
I
we
think the example most people would go to, and I've never talked to you about Lord of the Rings, but it seems like you disagree with this, but I think the example
I
people
just
go
think
to
they're
is-
bad movies. All. I think they're all equally bad movies.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think Return of the King is pretty good.
I don't know. I just don't care. I'm just so not caring by that point. That is 9 hours of my life I'm never getting back.
Fair enough, yeah.
Lord of the Rings, what the hell? Who would have thought?
I don't hate it. I just am like so dispassionately don't give a fuck.
Wow.
Kevin Smith perfectly summarized my thoughts on Lord of the Rings and Clerks 2. That's all I can say. It's 3 movies about people walking to a volcano. And I like couldn't put my finger on why I didn't like those movies until I saw that scene. I'm like, there it is. There it is. But regardless of that, yeah, I mean, Lord of the Rings works for most people fairly well, but even then, people still complain about the third one quite a bit.
Infinity War is going to be interesting because originally it was a part 1 and a part 2, and then they released it and said, well, now it's just Infinity War and then Untitled Avengers 4. But they just released a video about the start of production, and now the Russos are talking about it as 2 movies, and they are filming them simultaneously.
Maybe they're just gonna title the second one something else then.
God, like,
Yeah,
this
but I
is-
mean, they very intentionally came out with a statement saying it will not be a part 1, part 2 situation.
Yeah, but maybe like the first one's gonna be called Infinity War and the second one's gonna be called like Infinity World and Thanos will win.
Maybe. But part of the and I think this is also like the more practical reason. Part of the reason they're doing this is also because all the MCU actors at this point are like megastars.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just better to make them sign a contract that says, okay, 9 months of your life is ours right now.
There we go.
Sign over your life to us.
We own you for 9 months, yes.
Yep. That's funny. It's weird that happened, even with people like Chris Hemsworth, who like, where the fuck did that dude come from?
I don't know. He can't carry anything except Thor, though. Every action movie he's headlined has failed.
I don't know. He keeps coming back though.
He does.
It's weird.
He's going to be in Star Trek 4, assuming that ever happens.
Wait, they're whatever. I honestly just I don't know.
Well, before Beyond came out, they have a script where the next movie is going to be Chris Pine and Chris Hemsworth will be on screen together because Kirk will like go back in time or something and meet his dad. Like that is the premise of the fourth movie, and I think the guy that wrote Simon Pegg, the guy that wrote 3, is writing the fourth one, but we don't know if it's happening because Beyond didn't make as much as it was supposed to.
Well, maybe don't fuck your fans that make fan films, and people like me would have gone to go see it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Forgot about that drama already, but yeah, that was some bullshit right there.
It really
was a lot of bullshit, yeah.
Regardless of all that, though, yeah, Lord of the Rings, I mean, I don't like those movies, but I don't think that they're bad movies. I just think they're boring movies.
They're successful, though, right? I feel like if anyone is going to pitch a case for filming multiple movies at the same time, their pitch is going to include Back to the Future sequels and Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
Not The
That's
Hobbit,
fair.
not Matrix intentionally, or not even Pirates of the Caribbean intentionally, but like those are the movies that people love and were filmed that way.
Yeah, and so it's weird that this trick doesn't work more often. Because just naturally you'd assume that it would work better to film it all at once, have it all go, and then just get it out before the studio can fuck with it.
Yeah, I think it comes from I think the biggest problem with it's like the biggest problem with the Hollywood studio system right now, from things that I've read about people who have been very open about how it feels to be like a screenwriter in the industry or a director in the industry. It's this case of like almost like ultimate bureaucracy with inside Hollywood, where they are horribly afraid, and there are people, there are creative execs that have no qualifications to be meddling with anything related to narrative or any form of art, but they're creative execs. And so they see it as a formula, like a code that can be cracked, and the studios are horribly afraid, and the people at the bottom tier are the actual filmmakers. And so it's like we cannot risk making multiple movies back to back to back, because we do not the studio and the creative execs do not understand why people like movies that they like. They think people like The Dark Knight because it's dark and, as they would say, realistic. It's not really realistic and it's dark, but that's not why it's good. And then we see this with BVS, where everyone now is like, oh, they don't like BVS because BVS is too dark. That's not why people don't like BVS. And it's because it just shows you that the people that have the money that make the decisions have no idea what they're doing. And so I feel like they're horribly afraid to give anyone that kind of risk unless you're James Cameron.
And I mean,
you have to be a proven director to do it, right?
Yeah. And I mean,
and
it's
interesting because
to like the previous question, if you think about the way movies work, there's that saying that you write a movie 3 times. You write it when you write it, you write it when you shoot it, and you write it when you edit it. Mm-hmm. And part of the problem with shooting films back to back is it's like you have a recipe that you are sticking far too closely to, and suddenly something will collapse because you're planning for too much.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. Real quick on to Rasco's point, though. You know, I know I'm probably the only one here that cares for the nostalgia critic at all, but he has these 2 characters that are the studio execs show up every so often. And their catchphrase is, "The chart says." And it's all about that idea of the studio just thinking, oh, well, the chart says this. The chart says that, you know, to appeal to teens, we have to have an attractive male lead, and to appeal to adults, they have to wait to do anything too sexual until after they're married, and yada yada yada.
Yeah.
And like it's a really funny running gag because that's exactly how studio think works. But on to Steve's point, if you're planning for too much, maybe studio interference every so often is a good thing. And that's like probably the most controversial thing to say in art ever, that the studio is somehow an appropriate collaborator at times.
This goes back to the thing that Asko keeps talking about with, like, movies being the most collaborative process, right? Like, I love shitting on studios as much as the next guy, but sometimes someone that is outside of your wheelhouse, who doesn't understand your vision that you have to pitch things to, can be a good person for feedback.
Yeah, that can also be totally true. It's like with producers, this is a good example this happens with producers all the time, where sometimes you have a producer who does nothing but make one arbitrary demand, and then you have like a producer like Kathleen Kennedy who seems to really give a shit and actually have a lot of good creative input. If you watch some of the special features of The Force Awakens, and it's like these titles could mean a whole lot or very little. And then I also think that part of the blame is actually on audiences for articulating the reasons why they like something or don't like something terribly. They think that I go to The Dark Knight as an example because people think they like The Dark Knight because they think it's realistic and they think it's like somehow more important because of that. And neither one of those things are necessarily true. It's good outside of that.
It's the Foucault quote I like going to all the time, where like people know what they want, people may know why they know what they want, but they don't know what they want does.
Yeah, I mean, and this is like a whole thing with like film criticism right now, where like it's all about getting everything into a meme. Like you got to make a meme review of a film, like this little like one line to completely summarize whether or not a movie's good or not. Like, because that's like what
it's as stupid as having like a rating system where you pick an arbitrary noun from the movie and assign it to your goddamn 5-star rating.
Fascists.
Sorry, I had
my scope of how I can describe something intelligibly.
Yeah. Sorry, I just had to make a joke about myself. No, but Rasko, you're totally right, though. It's this weird thing of people just don't know how to articulate what they do or do not like about a thing. Most people, you ask them, hey, did you like that movie? Yeah, I thought it was good. What'd you like about it? It was good. What was your favorite scene? I don't know. What was your favorite line? I honestly don't know. And it took a long time for me to understand that other people don't do what I do. Back when I was a kid, I'd walk out of the theater with my mom and ask her, hey, what was your favorite part? And she's like, I don't know, I just watched it. I'm like, but what about this part? And I could quote the scene. I could quote the dialogue back to her. And she's like, it's like you sat there and memorized the whole movie while you were watching it.
Yeah.
And so it took me a long time as a kid to realize that's not just my mom, that's most people. They don't know what it was that they liked about it. They just saw it and thought it was good.
And this is where we can shit on studios again, because we force the narrative of people, to people, that movies are there as a distraction to do other things, like date movies or like commercials about how going to a movie is just what people do. Like we don't educate people on the function of art or even what art is. So everything just kind of becomes the thing you can consume and forget about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you get little quotes in not in like trailers, but in like movie advertisements after a movie's already come out, where it's like, here's what the critics think, and you get things like extremely watchable, and I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? Like, you can look at it, and it's possible to do that. Like, what the fuck? Say that. I don't know if there is any movie that doesn't, to some degree, reach that criteria.
AVP Requiem.
Yeah,
there we go.
It is not extremely watchable.
Watch that movie. Like, you can try, but it's actually, maybe that's why it's good art, because it like subverts its own purpose.
Dude, for April Fools, I will now write a video essay on how AVP Requiem is secretly brilliant for having really dark filters.
Yes! Do it, please.
I'll do
my
it
God.
now. Fuck, that's a good idea.
That is so funny. It was funny, Rasko and I were doing an Aliens fan film review, and it was like a little too well lit so that you could see like some of the less good parts of this xenomorph costume. And Rasko was talking about it. I was like, yeah, maybe they should have shot that a little more darker. I was like, oh, so you're recommending a movie take notes from AVPR. But okay, we're kind of off on studios and stuff, but I want to get back more to the idea of filming multiple movies at once. So we've talked a lot about the studio stuff. Does anyone else have anything else they want to talk about regarding the studio's thinking when doing this? Because I think it'd be, we're about half an hour in, and most of this has just been talking about the studio side of it. Do you want to talk about the people making the movie and then the audience side?
Well, I have a thing. My next point was going to be about the people making the movie anyway, so I'm good with the studios.
Good transition point then.
The next example, I think this might be another good go-to example, is that Kill Bill was filmed as one movie that was split into two. And so Quentin Tarantino didn't go into that movie writing a two-film thing. He wrote, like he always does, a 4-hour epic, and then rewrote it as he was shooting this for like 9 fucking months, and then rewrote it again when he cut the movie into 2 pieces. And I think it's interesting because I'm one of those people that's really controlling when I show people movies, like no texting, do not get up to use the bathroom, watch the whole damn thing beginning to end. It's a continuum. That's how it's supposed to work.
Yeah, I'm the exact same way. I get really
I'm an asshole, but, that's neither here nor there.
Steve will, slap the phone out of your head.
It's like a Clockwork Orange. Like, he puts you in a chair and,
sister
fries your eyelids open.
But, so Kill Bill is one of those things where, it's 2 movies, and the viewing experience of it is very intentionally now designed to operate as you watch one movie, and you watch the second movie, and now I can't conceive of those things as one movie. I don't think it watches well as a 4-hour thing. I think it operates as, this is one story, this is a second story.
And it's interesting how that doesn't work, or how that's obviously not the case for other things, like the Dark Knight Returns animated feature. Yeah. Where it was broken up into 2 movies, but just so they had time to do it all, so it really is just meant to be one movie. And I still don't understand the budgetary restriction behind that. We only have enough to make one movie, but we'll make it into 2 movies. So really, why not just do it all as one movie at one time? I don't understand. You're gonna spend the budget on both anyway. It's confusing. Anyway, because Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2. I mean, first of all, it's fucking 4 hours. I can't do that. I can only put that aside for some things. And yet, you're left at a point. A lot of these movies that are broken up and shot all at once and stuff will do this. They'll leave you with a cliffhanger where you immediately want to start watching the next thing because the story note is so powerful. Like Kill Bill Volume 1, and she fucking tosses what's-her-face down the snow to the ER, and fucking Bill shows up at the very end. Oh my god, I want to fucking watch the next movie, god damn it.
This is the thing. We mentioned this earlier, but this is the thing with the Pirates sequel and Matrix, I think Revelations. I always mix up the order of the sequels. But the second movies are intentionally designed so that you have to watch the third movie, so they don't function on their own at all. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. I like for movies to stand on their own, but I don't need everything to be Dark Knight, where, it doesn't matter whether or not you watch Batman Begins. I think it's important that you don't have to watch anything in the MCU after Iron Man 3, but you have to watch everything before it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes movies like this don't operate that way. You cannot just watch the second Matrix movie. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of something. I guess this is weird. The only franchise, and this is totally off topic, but the only franchise where you literally don't have to watch any of the other movies is the Predator franchise. At least that's the only one that's come to mind for me.
Indiana Jones.
All the Predator movies stand completely on their own.
You're right about that. You're right.
James Bond, for the most part, with the exception of Casino Royale and Quantum back-to-back, you don't have to watch any of them in any order.
I don't know about that. I'm not a James Bond fan, so I'm not going to argue, but I've heard Bill specifically say things like Bond's character arc throughout these movies.
No, I mean, I'm not debating that there is an arc that exists. It just doesn't matter.
Oh, okay. Well, no, just Predator occurs to me because, every time someone makes a movie in the Predator franchise, they're like, yeah, the only movie we're paying attention to is the first movie. And so they're all consistent with each other for that.
This happens with Godzilla all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, Godzilla reboots every couple months.
Every couple months.
Monster movies in general, like horror movies do this a lot too, where like sometimes sequels matter and at some point they just stop trying.
Yeah, like
at some point it just becomes a cash cow.
Yeah. Friday the 13th loses that thread much later than most other horror movies.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up horror movies, though, because those aren't necessarily shot at the same time, but when you get a franchise that starts moving, they want to have one come out every Halloween, every October.
The way Halloween 4 and 5 work, at least I think it's 4 and 5, it might be 5 and 6, it is shocking to me that they didn't shoot those back-to-back, because 4, I think it's 4, naturally leads into the next one.
Well, it's just interesting, like the Saw franchise comes to mind. They had those every year.
Yeah.
On October. So they weren't necessarily shot at the same time, because they damn sure weren't all written as to be shot back-to-back. But they weren't all shot at the same time, but like they'd finish shooting one and immediately start shooting the next one so that they can make the next deadline.
I think that literally how they handled those movies was they made one, had no plan, looked at what people thought they were seeding, but they weren't, and then took what people were like theorizing about on the internet and made that what happens in the next movie.
Well, it's interesting because with the Saw franchise, it's only worth watching the first two. Everything after the second one is straight garbage, and you do not need to watch it.
Yeah, I agree.
And the funny thing about the second movie is it was written as its own independent film and was being shopped around Hollywood right when Saw, the first film, came out. And so they brought it to Lionsgate, and Lionsgate was like, this is almost exactly like the surprise horror hit we just had. Could you do a slight rewrite on it to put it in that universe, use these characters? And they're like, yeah, totally. And that's how that movie got made.
I love when Wikipedia does this. This has nothing to do with anything else. She's looking up the Halloween movies. On their section for Halloween 4 and 5, it says, Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, as the title suggests, features the return of Michael Myers.
My God.
Some smart ass on the Wikipedia. Gotta love it. Gotta love it. That's a 13-year-old having fun on Wikipedia.
I kind of want to edit it now, so like the next sentence that says, picking up directly after the previous film, Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers features The Revenge of Michael Myers.
and then you can do for Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter. Friday the 13th Part 4, despite what its title says, is in fact not the final chapter of Friday the 13th.
Halloween H2O 20 years later opens 20 years later.
Halloween Jason in Space, like its title suggests, puts Jason Voorhees in space.
Freddy vs. Jason features Freddy fighting Jason.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because you look at the horror movie machine and how quickly that breaks down.
Yeah.
My joke has always been, and this is an inappropriate joke for the youngins, but my joke has always been, there are two film franchises that spawn 1 million sequels, and that's horror movies and pornos.
And you know what's interesting about horror movies? Like we were talking about earlier in this episode, how about like how people, like we've gotten to this place where like people see movies as something to do to occupy you while you're doing something else, like if it's a date or whatever. And it's like with horror movies, it's like we've turned it into like a really shallow version of what art is supposed to be like, where you get an emotional reaction from art. Horror movies is that taken to the bare minimum of it's like a drug like reaction. It's like you inject like horror movie heroin into your veins to give you like a cheap thrill.
Well, there's lots of interesting studies about how like people don't understand art, but for some reason it's very telling about our culture that we enjoy seeing other people murdered.
Yeah. And I mean, it's this weird thing, because we can go on and on about that for hours with the jump scare, couldn't we?
Yeah.
It's just the most it can work. It can be legitimate horror. It's a good tool, but it's just so overused and it's become so saturated.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to say the jump scare immediately makes your movie not artistic and bad, because I'm sure there are good uses of it that I just haven't seen in a long time.
Well, It Follows kind of has a couple jump scares.
Yeah. What? Oh, yeah, like when the body falls
Yeah.
out of the like stairs or whatever. Yeah, there's like great jump scares from time to time, but it's been so overdone that it's like Jesus fucking Christ with this shit.
Yeah.
It's gotten to the point where it's not even like a horror-centric tool anymore. Like, there are jump scares in, like, superhero movies randomly now.
That gets really irritating. Well, maybe to tie this back around a little bit, I think part of the reason we like to film movies back to back now, like, coming from like just a straight, if I was graduating from film school and I actually wanted to make an artsy movie and not a commercial one, there are certain things you learn when you're making a movie that make for great tricks that you don't realize or you can't read in a book. Like, just shooting certain things in the moment creates a feeling for you that you can't, like, plan out meticulously like Wes Anderson can. So the idea of filming something back-to-back, particularly with, like, horror movies, is you get very into the groove of how this movie is supposed to feel and what kinds of camera angles you should use. There's a technical name for this. I don't know it. I like calling it this. Horror movies that are good have this thing I like to call the perverted camera, which is like the camera comes out and it's showing you, in a very intentional style, things you probably shouldn't be seeing because it's supposed to make you uncomfortable. And, like, that's not a thing you just turn the camera on and do. That's like you have to get used to your set. You have to understand how the music's going to work. You have to understand the lighting. It's a mood. It's a zeitgeist. It's an aesthetic. It's not mechanical, and you can't replicate that 2 years later.
It's like mastering chaos is a big thing. It's like when you take art and you simplify it down to like very basic types of art, like painting. When I was in high school, there was a moment one day, because when I was a freshman, I took a shit ton of art classes. When I was a freshman, I really didn't like painting, because painting is one of those things, unlike like pencil work and colored pencil, those are very controllable, right? It's you color and you're good. With painting, you're in a series of chaotic things you have to constantly be worried about. You have to be worried about like how much water is in your brush. You have to be worried about like how dry the paint is already on your piece. You have to be worried about like if you've applied too much color and how to mix that with something else to dilute that color or to fix something you fucked up. And it's all like this very liquidy medium, and it's like really mastering like chaos. Like all these things are like simultaneously going wrong, and you have to like allocate your attention and your time, and that goes for painting, that goes for sculpture with like clay, and then that's like 10 times with like movie making, because there are so many things that you cannot plan for. And like just think about like weather.
When you mix the perfect color in a painting, you can't just stop 10 minutes later. You have to use it until it's done, or else you might not be able to do it again.
Yeah, you know exactly. You're absolutely fucked if that happens.
Ever seen the movie Vanishing Point?
Maybe. What's that about?
It's one of those like famous muscle car movies.
Oh no,
I have not seen that.
Guy's got a white Dodge Challenger and he's trying to drive from one part of the state to the other in a certain number of hours, being chased by police the whole way. It's not a very good plot, but it's got a lot of cool car chase scenes, which is why people love it.
Cool.
Tarantino mentions it in Death Proof. It's the white Challenger that they're driving in Death Proof, so it's this big nod to that. But I listened to the commentary of the original 70s Vanishing Point movie, and the director says, like, there's the shot of the car driving over some train tracks, like, toward the camera and everything. The director's like, oh god, I remember shooting this day, I was so angry. It was so random, and it came out of nowhere. There were big balls of hail just falling from the sky, and I was like trying to round everyone up. Quick, start shooting, get him in the car, get going. And right as we finally got everything set up, it only took, we got it done in record time. We did it so fast. And right when we flipped the camera on, hail stopped. Like, son of a bitch. I could totally feel his pain in that moment, because I've done shit like that. Like, okay, so there's this scene in my movie where we hit my friend Matt with a car, like run over him and then reverse and run over him again, and blah, blah, blah.
He's dead now.
Yeah, he's dead. It's like this whole thing, and initially, and what's in the movie is it's Bobby and I dressed up in different costumes, and it's stupid silliness. But while we were there, filming that scene in my neighborhood, for some reason, which I will never truly understand, there was like a family taking a picture in their driveway of all of them dressed as clowns. And we just thought, wow, that's really weird. And then we filmed the scene and started driving home, and we're like, son of a bitch, why didn't we get them to get out of the car? That would have been the best thing ever if, like, the car doors opened and we just had, like, clowns running out both sides. And, like, we just didn't fucking think of that shit at the time. It would have been the perfect moment to do that.
That'd be hilarious.
It would have made no sense, but it would have been so cool.
Yeah, it's like that scene in Super 8 where they're like shooting that scene at like the train station, and they see the trains coming, and the kid's like, production value.
Yeah, exactly. But to round this back more to the topic, I think that's also a problem with trying to film multiple movies at once, is you don't necessarily get, like, as many of those opportunities. And you're not dealing with the same kind of challenges that just, add subtle things that you have to work into your movie. To go to Star Wars again, we wouldn't have had the Wampa scene if Mark Hamill hadn't almost died. Like, that entire sequence is added because they needed to give a reason why Mark Hamill's face looked different. There was still the Hoth stuff, I think, but I'm pretty sure the whole stuff with the Wampa, which is just cool and just adds a certain feel to the Star Wars universe, wouldn't have been there if not for Mark Hamill getting in a car crash. Mm-hmm. And they needed to explain why his face looked different.
Well, and maybe to round this around to actors, can you imagine, like, the joke on Frasier, could you imagine playing the same character for 20 years? Could you imagine, like... I like the Marvel movies, but, like, it's not hard to just be the way Robert Downey Jr. is or the way Chris Evans is for 9 months. That's not difficult, I don't think. Mm-hmm. Maybe maintaining muscle mass, maybe, but, like, that's not a challenging psychological place to be. Driving back to something like Kill Bill, and imagine Uma Thurman trying to stay the way she is for 9 months.
Yeah.
Like, that's difficult, especially because you don't shoot movies linearly. You don't shoot the beginning, the middle, and the end. So, like, jumping back and forth between your personalities like that must be very exhausting, and then also alter the way you produce things, because at some points actors just can't do certain things.
Yeah. It's interesting because he died, but could you imagine if Heath Ledger had to get back into the role for Rises? That could have been very, very different.
Yeah. The same thing with The Crow, if Brendan Lee lived and we made more movies with that.
It's a movie that no one likes besides me, or I never hear anyone talk about, but Jet Li's Unleashed.
I've never seen that.
We're talking about that at some point. I'm picking that, and it's going to be one of those episodes that, like, surprises me with how many people end up watching it. But, like, Jet Li talked about doing that movie, and he got into such a dark headspace with it that he didn't make a movie for a year afterward.
Bruce Lee has a similar thing where, like, he died into the middle of the production of Enter the Dragon, but the way he was working himself out was part of the reason he died.
Mm-hmm.
Really? What happened? Wait, like, what happened?
Well, if you watch Enter the Dragon carefully, he has different muscle mass at different parts of the movie. Mm-hmm. And he was filming Game of Death. He was making Game of Death, and then he got invited to do Enter the Dragon. And Game of Death is not a good movie, but, like, if you read his original script and you look at, like, the original cut and stuff, it was set to be, like, a genius martial arts movie. And while he was, like, knee-deep in both writing, starring, directing, producing that movie, he had to do Enter the Dragon, which is the movie that got him his name. He worked himself to unhealthy levels, and, like, he was always, like, skinny and buff, but he became way too skinny in parts of that movie.
Mm-hmm.
This has nothing to do with anything, so I won't spend too much time on it, but I'm just going to ask because you made me think of it. And I know the answer's already, like, real-world answer is it's not going to happen, but I'm going to ask anyway. would you watch a Game of Death film based on Lee's original script if they Tarkined Lee in for the rest of it, for the parts he didn't actually film?
I don't think you can do that. Not because I doubt the technology, but because of Lee's philosophy. Like, he choreographs those fights in a very intentional way.
No, I mean, he's already filmed all the fights, though. All the fights for that movie are filmed.
No,
right?
no, they are, but like, if you want to go back around and do that without Lee, you would have to know his philosophy in and out. And part of the way his movies worked is that there would have to be some ebb and flow. Like, he would naturally have to respond to situations as they come up. That's part of the genius of what makes things like Fist of Fury work, is that it's not a set in stone formula. So, like, you could do it. I feel like if you did that, you kind of be going against the point of what he was trying to do, which is something natural, way of intercepting Fist, like that kind of thing.
Okay.
Like, I don't know. I would disagree with it even if it wasn't bad.
Gotcha. Just curious, because like I know that his family's banned digital use of him.
Yeah.
Not that stopped people, but just a thought I had, because I'm like, God, they could the technology's there. They could finish that movie.
They could. I'm content with just watching the action scenes. I feel like they work.
Yeah, fair enough. You don't like the version where they just stick a picture of Bruce Lee's face on the mirror and then...
Fuck that. You should see Game of Death 2. Game of Death 2 is hilarious.
Oh, yeah? Okay. Well, regardless of all that, just curious on that then.
Well, that brings up another good point of just, like, keeping an actor in shape, right? Like, Ben Affleck is an older dude. If he wasn't filming BVS and Justice League back-to-back, I imagine he'd be physically wasted.
Well, there's all those funny pictures of Ben Affleck smoking and, like, eating hamburgers and stuff. Yeah. And it's like, he's a guy in his 40s. Let it be.
Dude, like, that's ridiculous shit right there, though. Like, I think he filmed Live by Night, like, in between, like BVS till, like, he filmed that movie, I think, after BVS.
He did parts of it before BVS, and then he had to put it on an 18-month delay, and then he finished filming and editing it while writing Batman, while getting ready to film Justice League.
Okay, see, well, that's crazy, because, like...
Well, also going through a divorce.
The day he was cast as Batman, he was, like, in the gym, lifting weights, getting ripped, like, the day he found out he had the part. Like, how do you do that? Because, like, the thing is also, like, how big he is, it's not something that you just maintain. Like, your body will just naturally start to not look like that anymore. Because he reaches such, like, inhuman levels of, like, buffness in BVS that it's, like, it's amazing. He still has to be working out, like, every fucking day.
Well, there was something with, like, he was prepping for the role and he was filming some other movie, not one that he was directing, and, like, the costume designer was like, no, Ben, you have to stop working out. Your costumes are not fitting anymore.
It was probably the accountant. That's
yeah, that's what it was.
Like, that's crazy.
It's... The whole idea of, like, actors not only staying in mental shape, physical shape, maintaining sets is, I think, maybe a good reason that people do this, because, of course, I can't think of an example. How often have you watched a movie where they're on a set and in the sequel they go back to that same location, but it's very much not the same location?
I'm trying to think of an example because I know exactly what you're talking about, but...
Yeah, that's so... like, some people do it really well. Like, Spielberg has a great eye for that shit. Like, Back to the Future 1 and 2 were, to go back to those movies, were filmed several years apart, so they refilmed the ending scene of Back to the Future 1 for the beginning of Back to the Future 2, and everything's perfect.
Yeah,
like,
you can't tell unless you know.
Yeah, like, you can watch videos of those scenes playing at the same time, and, like, Doc speaks in the same time. Like, I don't know how he did it, but he did it. So it's just one of those things. I guess I see it more on television than I do in movies.
Yeah.
Television examples are coming to mind more readily. It's also weird when you see television shows use sets from other television shows. Like, Scrubs has an example of this, where JD has... It's early on in Scrubs, too, but JD has, like, one of his little fantasies, and it's like him and Elliot are married, and they're in the house, the set for the house from My Wife and Kids.
Oh, interesting.
That's interesting, dude. I was in LA and on the Warner Brothers lot. Like, there, I didn't realize this until I was there. So much of that is just from the show Gilmore Girls and from Adam West Batman, and it's still there. And these sets are still used all the time, and they change them zilch. And they're just straight up Adam West, Batman, and Gilmore Girls sets that they just use for tons of shit.
Sitcoms, for the most part, are almost always filmed in, like, the same couple of places, because there's... Like, to filming a sitcom, we've perfected it. We know how the room should look, so they almost always look the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's what made Frasier so good, is it just didn't.
Yeah. But, like, Parks and Rec has a very simple set. What's it called? How I Met Your Mother has very simple sets, but that show sucks for other reasons.
I don't like this show, but The Big Bang Theory, I saw those sets, and they've got those down pat.
Yeah. I imagine Star Wars, because they built the Millennium Falcon, I imagine, like, preserving that over the course of filming movies must be a bitch.
It must be. It's weird, because it's like, I don't understand why studios would do that in some cases. Because sometimes, like, people are so stingy about sets. Like, I know that, like, Alien 3, they were like, no, we fucking built the sets for the wooden monk planet. So you have to use these fucking sets, okay? We built sets, because originally one of the original scripts for Alien 3 was, like,
we know.
Of, like, wood with a bunch of monks. And they're like, we built these sets. You've got to fucking put these in your movie. We're not remaking them. And I'm like...
And, like, so it makes me wonder, like... and maybe one of you will know the answer to this. So is the Millennium Falcon in Force Awakens the same one from the 70s?
No.
No.
They use reference from it, but they built a new one from the ground up.
Okay, because, like, I know one thing, like, the silver plating that C-3PO wears in Attack of the Clones, that's actually the original C-3PO costume.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it had aged, sitting in storage for, like, 30 years or whatever, so they just put Anthony Daniels back in it, aged it up a little bit more, and it looked fine.
Oh, that's cool.
Interesting. Some things like that, though, like... I admire the whole, cool, you're gonna get artistic and build a thing, but I don't fucking need a built from the ground up Millennium Falcon. I don't need that. Why do that?
In my backyard, Steve.
I mean, it's cool, but, like, what practical purpose does that serve?
I don't know. It just looks neat. It's just one of those added details that's really cool. Like, you know, in Star Wars, the original New Hope, you see, like, that skeleton in the sand dunes. It's like, looks like a dinosaur skeleton or whatever.
Yeah.
They just fucking left that there. And so, like, some archaeologists found it a couple years back, and they just took some bones from it. Game of Thrones did a similar thing. They, like, had some giant, like, wooden and plaster dragon skulls built and just left them in places as marketing. And they just fucking left them there. No one's moved them. They're too fucking big.
That's awesome.
Fucking cool.
So you can
See, like, stuff like that makes sense. I just imagine financing and preserving a giant Millennium Falcon is a waste of money.
I like it. That's my favorite thing about filmmaking is you get a bunch of guys in suits that are professionals in a room, and they all agree that it's a good idea to invest millions of dollars into creating movies with spaceships and monsters and robots. And this is what they think is a good use of millions of dollars. That's why I love movies. It's because it's ridiculous to say that out loud, but it is actually profitable. And
there is an argument to be made for something like rebuilding the Millennium Falcon from the ground up, because you can get your money back for that over time.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
If you make, like, some of the sets and are able to move them again, you can get your money back by, you know, putting it somewhere else, like, and charging people to walk around in it and take pictures.
Yeah, and they did that with the original Star Trek set.
Yeah, So and that's like a nothing set. So
Yeah.
I don't know. You can make your money back. I certainly don't want everything to go George Lucas. Just every single set is digital. I think that's a terrible idea.
No, I mean there's a balance.
Yeah, it's really weird.
And like set design and stuff is important in filming stuff back to back, particularly if you're like making heavy use of CGI and stuff, where like you want things to texturally look consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and when it comes to certain projects, like you can take away some of that like chaos by shooting things on a set. Like we already saw a little bit of like behind the scenes stuff for Infinity War. And obviously they're on like this big like ravaged battlefield looking set, and it's got like green screen and stuff like there, and stuff like that in the back. And like with a movie like that, I'm like, I mean, I buy that is probably the most efficient but also useful way to shoot that kind of scene.
Yeah.
I will never buy that freaking Natalie Portman standing on a bunch of like green cushions tied to strings above her that are gonna come down like conveyor belt presses. Like I'm never gonna buy that. That's the best way to shoot that scene, but.
Yeah,
so funny.
yeah.
If you watch the behind the scenes for that part, she's like, "This is a joke, right? This isn't actually in the movie." And he's like, "Yeah, it is. Go there and you gotta duck over the thing." It's just really fun.
I love your fucking George Lucas voice. You sound like goddamn Kermit the Frog. It's not easy being George. Now I just want a George Lucas puppet that talks like Kermit. And you could make a Carrie Fisher Miss Piggy. Yay. This is a thing now. This is a thing. It's Star Wars. Someone's already made it.
I'm sure.
I am like, without knowing for fact, I am like 90% sure that there is a group of Star Wars fans who dressed up like stormtroopers and reenacted the Boston Tea Party. Bet money right now.
I want that so badly now.
Anyway, regardless of all that, okay, so we've talked about the stuff with the actors, we've talked about stuff with the studio, we've talked about the set design, the people making it. Let's do a little bit on like it from the director's standpoint, because we've touched on it here and there, but I don't think we've really gone into it from the director's standpoint, because making a movie is probably most draining on the director more than anyone else. And I know that sounds ridiculous because they're fucking sitting there watching TV all day. That's like, you know, I know you don't really care for Kevin Smith, Steve, but I love the way he describes his job, because he has like no bones about how fucking lucky he is about it.
Right.
Because he goes, I fucking get paid to sit and watch TV. I practiced my whole life for this.
Is it easier or is it more difficult if you have like a year of your life blocked up to make one movie? Or two movies, really?
There's that, and it's just like, you have to tell fucking everybody what to do.
Yeah.
It, like, who gets blamed for a bad movie? It's 90% of the time we say it was a bad director.
Yeah, and a great example of that at work right now, I guarantee you that Ben Affleck has extreme hesitation about the Ben Affleck Batman movie, and by simply not directing it, it is no longer Ben Affleck's Batman movie.
That's exactly what Kevin Smith said. He said that part of the reason Ben Affleck probably stepped down is that, well, now he doesn't have to compete with his Ben Affleck's Batman as good as Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight, because now it's not his.
Wow, I haven't seen that, but I'm glad someone agrees with me about that.
And Kevin Smith is a friend, or was a friend of Ben Affleck, so I imagine if anyone's got a read on him, it's probably him.
Wait, was a friend?
Well, they don't talk anymore.
Oh, shit.
They used to be fucking best friends. They were working together constantly, but at some point they had a falling out. Partly because like Ben Affleck got more busy.
Huh. Weird. Because was that like recently? Because I know that
it's not like they had an argument and they split. It's just like over time they just drifted.
Okay. That makes more sense, because I'm pretty sure I saw like clips of them together after the Batfleck announcement.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they don't like each other or anything. It's just like they work on two opposite ends of the Hollywood spectrum.
No, I got you. Just the way you phrased it made it sound like they had like a spat.
Oh yeah, I gotcha.
Anyway, regardless of all that, God, Steve's breaking up my Jersey boy, my Jersey boy crushes. Anyway. Don't break up the bromance, man. Don't break up the bromance for me. Anyway, no, like, the director is just... Everyone blames the director, or everyone gives the director credit when maybe it was all the DP. You don't fucking know.
Yeah, it's really interesting, like, and because this is the whole thing with filmmaking, is that while everyone has a job, it can be really flexible. Like, someone like Ridley Scott with some of his films should probably have a writing credit. I mean, like, Blade Runner and Alien, Ridley Scott really should have, like, a writing credit for those films. To some degree, Zack Snyder should have a writing credit for freaking BVS, because he storyboards those movies. And I can guarantee you there's a lot of story that happens in the storyboarding process that is not in the script.
I mean, especially when your director's rationale for everything is, well, it would look cool.
Yeah, no, exactly. So it's, like, it's really interesting, because, like, within the filmmaking process, it's like, a label can mean a whole lot or a whole little. Like, producers can have a lot of influence or do jack shit and demand you put a giant spider in your movie and make that their one request. And like, sometimes you'll have, like, a lot of people give...
Kevin Smith today. This is fun.
A lot of people give, like, Max Landis a lot of shit for a lot of movies that he's the writer on. But he has all of his scripts on it's on his website. You can read every script for every movie that he's ever written, even movies that have never been made and will never be made.
He put his Power Ranger script online, and that was interesting.
Yeah. You compare them to the movies that we get, and it's like, wow, like, someone else needs a writing credit on this, because it's drastically different, and this dialogue that was not in his script didn't just come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
And, I don't know, Max Landis is such a weird case, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like all of Max Landis' stuff, but, like, he's very open about the process. This is why I pay attention to Max Landis, because he's very open about things, and, like, he'll talk about in real time how something's going wrong. Like, his movie Bright, which is going to be a Netflix exclusive directed by David Ayer with Will Smith, that movie, he put a tweet out, how he's like, it's amazing to me how I've become so totally distanced from a project I was so once adamantly passionate about. And it's like, oh my god, like, that sucks, because he was really excited about that movie, and now he has nothing to say about it because he's become so disconnected from that film.
Landis is interesting. I like the things he makes. I wish he would never speak.
Yeah. Yeah. He's got that Alan Moore thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, when he starts shit-talking feminism and stuff, I just want to beat the shit out of him. But, like, I read Superman American Alien, and I'm like, why is this guy not writing every teen book?
It's so funny the way people are with that. It's just like, people will talk about, like, oh no, you can't disconnect the artist from the work. I'm like, you can't entirely, but there's some cases to be made. Like, I say the same thing. I say this joke about Alan Moore all the time, but I really wish Alan Moore was like one of those guys who wrote everything down, and then just as he was starting to get recognized, died. But every few years, we find a script from him and make it. I really wish Alan Moore was one of those guys.
Do not ruin this beautiful moment by speaking.
Yeah, exactly. Can we just punch Alan Moore in the throat, like, a bunch?
If it erases all the old video clips of him talking, yes.
Yeah. No, but, like, that's the thing, because while the director filming multiple movies at once, like, that can get really fucking stressful, so maybe that's the reason that by the time you get to the end of a lot of these third movies, they just get incomprehensible. Because he's just so, like, fucking done with it.
And, I mean,
it's hard to be in charge of that many people all at one time.
And not to shift it, but, like, I would imagine they shoot together for, like, 9 months to a year, and, like, shots vary in quality as the director is both in and out of focus with the project, and then they edit one movie really well, and then by the time they start editing the second movie, no one cares anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because it's such a counterintuitive thing. you would think doing it all at once would lead to more in line with the original vision and thus better. Because that's what we're always told. We're always told that these movies are bad because people interfered or it's not enough like the original vision. Well, shit. I don't know what to say. That can't be true because there are so few examples where the quote-unquote original vision was successful. If we're to believe that the original vision is closer to what we're getting with something like this, where it's uninterrupted filming. I don't know.
It's weird. Perhaps it's weird. Maybe the original vision isn't what you get when you shoot things back to back. Like, maybe a truer version of the film would exist were you to not film them back to back and still not have the studio interference.
Maybe, or maybe the studio interference and, like, reacting to what people had to say about the film so you have enough time to change things is what helps improve it. I don't know.
It's weird, because, like, we see examples that directly contradict each other all the time. Like, a good example of really reactionary filmmaking in a bad way is the DC cinematic universe right now. That is, like, the textbook example of when people are paying attention to how people are reacting to their movies, and they're taking way too much stake in really shallow, completely devoid of any sort of, like, actual critique. Because, like, the biggest thing I say about the DC cinematic universe that bothers me about how people have reacted to those movies is they do not adequately articulate why the movies are bad. They come up with memes of why the movies are bad.
Mm-hmm. And so just it creates this whole disconnect of just being able to take a little bit of time, but not to let it. Let me rephrase that. It's the idea of being able to address problems that people are seeing without compromising what's good about your piece.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like the idea of adding reshoots to Suicide Squad to insert more jokes because BVS was just too fucking down for people is not the worst thing that could be done to retool that movie. That's clearly not all that they did. They fucking changed everything about the movie. And, I don't know, maybe it would have still been awful either way.
It's weird, because it's like they did most of the retooling of that film in the editing process, which is really weird. They filmed one movie, and then edited that movie as if it were a different movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's so fucking weird.
I mean, when you hire people that make trailers to edit the entire movie, that's bound to happen, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, those are some really good trailers. Hello?
Yes.
Okay. Steve was like cutting out there for a second, and everything was just really quiet. Damn it! Steve keeps dropping in and out of the call. Okay. Anyway, what's an example where doing some reaction to what people were saying actually worked out really well?
There are things where I feel like... Okay, I want to get, like, a good example, because, like, it's one of those... I don't want to just, like, say a movie.
Because there's listening too much, and you get, like, sequelitis. Like The Mummy and The Mummy 2, it's the same fucking movie. To the point where they had to make a joke about it in the third movie, which, guess what? It's the same fucking movie. You have that shit happen. What's a good example of this, though? Where, like, they listened to a complaint and they addressed it, but they didn't let it radically change what they were doing. They acknowledged a problem and fixed it. Because that's what I'm kind of doing with this script I'm working on. I'm a reviewer. I review things with a lot of other people. So I'm sending them my script, like, just any thoughts. And I had a conversation with the guy, he's like, you never really established this thing. So I'm like, oh, feedback, thank you. quick 2-word thing inserted to firmly establish that, so people cannot make that complaint again. Boom. I'm done. So, like, things that deal with that. I'm trying to think of movies where they like, everyone complained about one specific thing, and so they fixed it in the next movie. I guess I could say it didn't fix the movie, but it was a good fix for Man of Steel, is the opening of BVS with Batman in Metropolis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was a good, like, that was a good way to address people's complaints about Man of Steel and set up a really good, didn't deliver a really good characterization for why Batman wants to fight him.
Yeah. In a very kind of, like, shallow way it addressed that criticism. And it didn't have to be shallow. Like, the big thing that bothers me about that is, like, they do the scene that you need, but Batman, after that scene, it's like I don't really think they understood why the scene that they added there was necessary. Like, it's a good scene, and it works as a scene, but, like, it's like they completely misinterpret why that scene was important for the rest of that movie. But I agree with you. That's an example of something where it was like the feedback needed to be listened to. God, I'm really trying to think of something where this is absolutely the case. Like,
it's one of those pain in the asses about doing off-the-cuff reviews, right?
Yeah.
Or off-the-cuff discussions and reviews where, like, think of an example to prove your point. Okay. Fuck.
Thing is, I'm sure this exists, right? There are probably things that, like...
Nothing's coming to mind. This happens all the time when you're doing off-the-cuff discussions like this.
Yeah, and there's probably also a ton of things that people aren't even aware this was the case for.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's really irritating me. So there's got to be, like, a big obvious one. There's always a big obvious one.
Iron Man 2.
Oh, okay.
Iron Man 2 and the Marvel Cinematic Universe after the fact.
Oh shit! Oh, I got one.
Go.
This movie hasn't come out yet, but, like, the vibe I'm getting from it is, don't worry, people. And this is Thor Ragnarok. Like, I really don't like Thor: The Dark World. I think that is a very bland movie, and not in, like, it's acceptably mediocre. It's just, like, that movie bored the shit out of me. But Thor: The Dark World, it's like they're making a sequel to a movie that was, like, a smash hit. With the casting and the choice of director, they got a real director for that film. It's just, like, it's so... That movie just, like, oozes with, like, we're incredibly confident in this product. Don't worry. If you weren't totally down with the last film, like, don't worry. That's just the vibe I get from it. I'm not saying that movie's going to be great, but it has all the elements there for that movie to be great.
Yeah, and I feel like, you know, Iron Man 2 was a movie that, like, kind of sloppily was setting up the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and so you didn't have those same mistakes done with Captain America and with Thor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They didn't make it feel as wink, wink, nudge, nudge, Avengers is coming kind of thing.
Yeah, it was. And Marvel's gotten really good about making it feel not like a they've gotten to the place where when something is setting up things to connect to other films and kind of bring the universe together, it's like oh, that's cool. This is how they're doing this. It's the exact opposite. And I really don't like just always bringing up, like, the DC Cinematic Universe right now, but it's like it's a great case study. It's a great case study. Like, doing a 5-minute commercial for Justice League with little stupid gifs of every single Justice League member is a terrible way to handle that, right?
Yeah, it's a bad plan. I don't know. It's all over the place, and I just think having that time there is a good thing. Even if, like, the artists, the people making the movie, don't acknowledge that they're reacting to reviews and public reaction. It's just a good thing to have some time between a piece. I don't like the idea, at least in movies, where it's so much time devoted to it. Because, like, you know, it's treating movies like television, and they're just not. When you've got that much more time, when you're working that much longer for something that is, relatively speaking, so much shorter and meant to be viewed all at one time, I don't know, there's just a disconnect that something needs to be different there.
Yeah, here's another example. I can't speak to this because we haven't seen The Last Jedi yet, but I know, like, Oscar Isaac was supposed to die in The Force Awakens, and I think during the production of that film was when a couple movies with him in them came out where people were like, oh shit, this guy is legit. Like Ex Machina, I think Ex Machina came out and people were like, holy crap, dude, Oscar Isaac is freaking a beast. And there was a single rewrite for Episode 8, and it didn't seem like it was anything big. I think it was to increase his involvement in that film, maybe to just put his involvement in that film, period, because I know that they weren't plotting him, they weren't plotting like his character arc out for the next two films, because he was supposed to die up until they were filming The Force Awakens and liked him so much. So, like, that's an example of, and that's played out to the point where people have, like, an obsession with him as a character now, and so it's totally paid off for them, and, like,
he's got his own fucking comic.
Yeah, so, like, that's obviously, like, an example of, like, it was probably a mix of, on set, they realized how awesome he was. Because the thing I love about him as an actor is that when he talks about his movies, he is extremely articulate in explaining things about the characters that he plays. And it's not just like a guy who goes in and reads the lines. Like, he really understands the movies that he's in, and he understands the characters that he plays. And it's really exciting to listen to Oscar Isaac talk about anything he's in. But, it's probably a mix of people saw him in some movies at the time and really liked him, and then on set they were like, oh, we really like this guy. And both of those things kind of probably mixed and made him like a mainstay of the new trilogy. So I'm really, like, that's an example of, like, probably a couple different factors, but definitely some outside influence from, like, public reception to him as an actor.
Probably, definitely. Okay, do we have anything else we want to talk? It looks like Steve's not going to make it back. He just sent me a message saying his computer straight died on him. Oh no! But he also told me the movie he wants to review. So, okay. Do we have anything else we want to say about, like, making multiple movies all at one go?
I don't really have anything else to say.
I mean, it's a weird topic, and we kind of went all over the place. But I do think it's an interesting idea to talk about. I guess ultimately it's one of those things where if it's done really, really well, it can pay off really, really well. But it's so easy. There's so many things that can go wrong that I just feel like it makes more sense to have some spacing between your movies. At least relatively speaking. Yeah. I don't like... Because there's... You know, we talked about it last week with Green Lantern. Legend of Zorro is a really interesting case because... literally no one on that project of any importance changed. Still Antonio Banderas, still Catherine Zeta-Jones, same writers, still Martin Campbell directing. It's all the same team. It is not at all a sequel to Mask of Zorro. It feels so wrong, and it's like 7 to 8 years later.
Really?
And I think everybody changed too much between those movies.
Well, actually, I just thought of another example. The Hobbit trilogy, as far as, like, that was all filmed together, correct?
Yeah,
because it was supposed to be like 2 movies, and then it was made into 3, so it must have been filmed all together. And there's a great video. I haven't actually watched the special features for that movie, but it's one of those. It's kind of like the Batman and Robin special features where, like, you can play the little confessionals of the people making the film. You can, like, play those as a review of the movie, where they, like, perfectly articulate the problems with it. And it's like, there was a video I saw where somebody did, like, an edit where they just took all of these little pieces of confessionals of different actors and Peter Jackson and different producers and execs and stuff, and they put them all together. And it's all special features you can find on the discs for The Hobbit. And it is, like, them talk, like, oh, we had to plan things just on, like, a whim. Peter was so exhausted the whole time. we come in and we were like, oh, we don't even know what to do. We need to take a break. We just can't even do anything. We're so like burnt out. Like all of this stuff. Like, oh my god, like you're so upfront about all of the things that I think people kind of complain are the systemic problems of the film. So it's like it's very interesting.
Yeah, I gotcha. And so there's this happy medium of don't wait like half a decade or more to do your sequel, but also don't necessarily, unless you really know what you're doing, do them back to back like that.
Yeah.
It's a real problem. I feel like it's one of those things where you need a reason to do it back to back other than we want to make sure we have these released within a year of each other.
Mm-hmm.
I still think like rushing the Harry Potter, a couple months ago I watched through all the Harry Potter movies. I think the biggest problem with that franchise is that they rushed they wanted to make sure they had movies coming out with the books to the point where the movies caught up with the books and they had to wait a little bit longer between them. But like, you remember you've watched the 7 and 8, right?
Yeah.
The Harry Potter movies?
Yes.
Yeah, you know how Harry has like that fucking piece of a mirror?
Mm-hmm.
That's never explained in the movies where the fuck he got that from.
Oh.
Because that was an element introduced in book 5 with this like really tragic irony backstory to it that he's just had ever since book 5, but they didn't think it was going to be important enough when they were shooting movie 5, so they didn't shoot that. And so it's just this whole huge fucking plot hole because it's like this major plot element in the 7th and 8th movies.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, so like you need some distance, you need some time between your things to realize what's going to be important and what's not. But you don't want to take so much time that by the time you come back to it, you've lost the vision.
Yeah, something similar to that happened in Game of Thrones actually recently.
Really?
And actually, I think it has. And I saw a video, and the title of it confirmed what I had been thinking about, but I haven't actually gone down. I didn't watch the video, and I haven't gone back to make sure I'm factually right about this. But in Game of Thrones, there was a character who has a specific item they always wear, and it's a big reveal that when they take that item off, they transform into a different state of being. And there are scenes, I suspected this, and I think other people have pointed out that it's true. Like I said, I only saw like the brief title of a video that kind of confirmed what I thought the video was going to be about, but I didn't actually click on the video. And it was like, did Game of Thrones make a mistake? And had the character and the item that I was talking about circled. And I think there are scenes with this character, like where they're naked taking a bath, where they're not wearing it. And they're not, and they didn't, because I don't think they realized that item was going to be incredibly important for that character to always have on until they randomly don't have it.
Well, like, that's an interesting case, because those books were coming out so long ago, but they're still not finished.
Yeah.
And everyone's, of course, worried that George R. R. Martin's going to fucking die before he finishes the books.
He's told the showrunners, he's told them everything that's going to happen, at least in a very general sense.
Gotcha. It's just one of those things, like, everyone, their brother's super worried about that, but it's like, okay, guys, it's a little rude. Conan has a great video of it where he's like, I've set up cameras in George R. R. Martin's house so we can see what he's doing while he's working on Game of Thrones, and maybe we'll get some early spoilers. And it's just like some guy in like a George R. R. Martin costume, like walking around the house doing everything but writing. So it's just really funny. He's like just chilling in the pool. It's just silly. But anyway, like those books were coming out in the fucking 90s and shit. And so you'd think that they'd have... That's probably just a continuity error more than it is a not realizing that it would be important error, you know?
It might be, but I don't know.
I see what you're saying. Like, the shard of glass in Harry Potter is a major fucking error because they put the cart before the horse. And so I do feel like you need time between movies is what I'm trying to say with this.
Yeah.
Anyway, that'll do it for this week's episode of Geeky Gentlemen. Next week, Steve picked a topic for us because he wants me to watch Wes Anderson movies. So we're going to be watching The Grand Budapest Hotel and reviewing that next week.
Okay.
Tune in for our fan film review of... Fucking, what was it? Shit on dicks. Oh, Tron Ignition.
Oh, yeah.
That'll be posted this Thursday. Watch me on Comic Reviews. Go subscribe to Rasco's channel, even though he never uploads anything. And yeah, that'll be it. So see y'all. Plenty of content coming over the next week or two. Got a special episode with Deadpool Zilla I need to throw up at some point, but I don't know when. He was asking me about that, and I'm just like, I'll fucking have a place for it, god damn it.
You'll find a way.
Anyway, everyone, thanks very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
And I am the beta male cuck.
Indeed. He will totally come to your house and watch you fuck your wife. And jerk off while you do it. Anyway, everyone, thanks very much for watching. We are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.